पिछले वीडियो में मैंने आपको बताया था कि हम वैल्यू एडेड मेथड और इनकम मेथड के थ्रू नेशनल इनकम को कैसे कैलकुलेट कर सकते हैं। थर्ड और लास्ट मेथड हमारा एक्सपेंडिचर मेथड। एक्सपेंडिचर मेथड इज एन अटेम्प्ट टू मेजर ओवरऑल एक्सपेंडिचर ऑफ अ नेशन, यानी जो कुछ भी हम खर्च करते हैं एट मार्केट प्राइस ड्यूरिंग एन अकाउंटिंग ईयर। इट इज ऑल्सो नोन एज इनकम डिस्पोजेबल मेथड और कंजम्पशन एंड इन्वेस्टमेंट मेथड, जो कि हमारे एडी के कंपोनेंट्स भी हैं। एग्रीगेट डिमांड, दैट इज कंजम्पशन एंड इन्वेस्टमेंट। इनकम डिस्पोजेबल मींस वट एवर द मॉनिटरी इनकम वी यूज टू रिसीव, हाउ डू वी स्पेंड दैट। ओके, सो it estimates national income by aggregating all final expenditures. Now these are the steps involved. The step one is to identify economic units incurring final expenditure. Incurring final expenditure, all the economic units which incur final expenditure within the domestic territory of a country can be classified into following four groups: household sector, producing sector, government sector, rest of the world sector. There are four sectors in the economy: two sector economy, that is containing only the firm and household sector, and the third one becomes which intervenes, that is government sector, and the rest of the world sector, in which the closed economy becomes open economy. Okay, so this will be the step second, where we will be classifying the final expenditure. Now let me explain you what are the components. In this method, national income is measured by aggregating final expenditure. So हमारे फाइनल एक्सपेंडिचर के कौन से कंपोनेंट्स होंगे, हम उनको ले लेते हैं. फर्स्ट इज फाइनल कंजम्पशन एक्सपेंडिचर, दैट इज PFCE and GFCE, that is private final consumption expenditure, and GFCE, government final consumption expenditure. And then the second is gross domestic capital formation, in short it is known as GDCF, and it is containing gross fixed capital formation, change in stock, as we all know, closing minus opening stock becomes change in stock, and net acquisition of valuables. And the third thing that will start with net exports, that is the difference between the export and import. And in the expenditure method, first we start to calculate from the aggregate, that is known as GDP at MP. Now step 3, estimation of final expenditure. Third important step in the measurement of national income is the estimation of different components of final expenditure. अभी इससे पहले मैंने आपको बताया कि that what are the components of final expenditure. हमने उस समय बोला PFCE, GFCE, GDCF and net exports. लेकिन PFCE के भी एक certain components हैं, जैसे मैं बताऊंगी आपको. Private final consumption expenditure. In this regard, the value of following item is measured. Now, let me tell you that what are these items which are to be included in private final consumption expenditure. First, purchases of currently produced goods and services, except services for self-consumption. Because whatever we are buying it, whatever we are purchasing from the market, we could have to pay the price for it. Then purchases made by resident household abroad, बाहर जो रह रहे हैं उन्होंने जो खरीदना है, कुछ के ऊपर जो खर्च करना है. Value of production for self consumption at prevailing prices, prevailing market prices, where here we are talking about. Imputed rent of own occupied house. Imputed rent of own occupied house, it means if we just take the house for living, for accommodation, we could have to pay the rent for also. Then household expenditure by non-profit, this is also known as NPOs, serving households. Now, however, net sales of second-hand goods, as we are again and again repeating that the national income is the money value of all final goods and services. That's why the net sales of second-hand goods and sale of scrap should be deducted from private final consumption expenditure, or we can also say it PFCE. Now, final consumption expenditure by government. As we have said that final consumption expenditure is PFCE and GFCE. So, PFCE we have already discussed. Now we are discussing the final consumption expenditure by government. Government here means the general government. Basically, the motive of government sector is to provide public welfare. So, the value of government final expenditure is the sum total of following items. And what are these items? Compensation of employees paid by the government, goods and services purchased by the government from domestic market, यानी जो उनका prevailing market price है उस पर government purchase करती है, and how it is being calculated by multiplying the value of sales to government by enterprises on retail prices, per unit price जिसे हम retail price कहते हैं, then purchases from abroad. So these all will be the components of the government final consumption expenditure. And now the second step for calculating the gross domestic product at market price is gross domestic capital formation, and in short it is known as GDCF. It is also having certain components. Expenditure on construction, जिसमें कि हम किसी भी बिल्डिंग को बनाने के लिए जो भी मटेरियल इनपुट्स यूज करते हैं हम उसको रखेंगे कंस्ट्रक्शन में. देन फाइनल एक्सपेंडिचर ऑन machines and equipment means any addition to improvement in existing building is considered as a part of existing capital formation, therefore included in national income. Any maintenance of building or machine does not involve any addition in the capital formation, इसीलिए हम इसको national income में count नहीं करेंगे. Now we must include following two items to make it GDCF, as we all know that it is known as gross domestic capital formation. इसके कौन कौन से components होंगे अभी मैं बताती हूँ आपको. Expenditure on change in stock. Change in stock कैसे calculate करते हैं? Closing minus opening करके. Then expenditure on acquisition of valuables, that is the ये दोनों को ऐड करके बनता है हमारा GDCF या ग्रॉस डोमेस्टिक कैपिटल फॉर्मेशन. और इसको बनाने के लिए हमें करना पड़ता है GDFCF, ग्रॉस डोमेस्टिक फिक्स्ड कैपिटल फॉर्मेशन, प्लस चेंज इन स्टॉक दैट इज क्लोजिंग माइनस ओपनिंग स्टॉक, प्लस एक्सपेंडिचर ऑन एक्विजिशन ऑफ वैल्यूएबल्स, दैट विल गिव अस द GDCF और ग्रॉस डोमेस्टिक कैपिटल फॉर्मेशन. Now the third step which is left for calculating gross domestic product at market price is net exports. It is the difference between exports and imports of a country during the period of 1 year. Means the export of goods and non-factor services minus import of goods and non-factor services. Step 4. Estimation of net factor income earned from abroad. ये सब हम जानते हैं कि हमारे नेट फैक्टर इनकम अर्न फ्रॉम अब्रॉड के कंपोनेंट्स होते हैं. नेट कॉम्पनसेशन ऑफ एम्प्लॉइज, नेट इनकम फ्रॉम प्रॉपर्टी एंड एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप जिसे हम ऑपरेटिंग सरप्लस कहते हैं, एंड नेट रिटेन अर्निंग्स अब्रॉड. ओके, सो इफ वी ऐड नेट फैक्टर अर्निंग फ्रॉम अब्रॉड इन डोमेस्टिक फैक्टर इनकम इट बिकम्स नेशनल इनकम. अभी तक हम क्या कर रहे थे? वी वर जस्ट कैलकुलेटिंग द डोमेस्टिक इनकम. नाउ the last and the final step is the estimation of national income, means domestic income will be converted into the national income. All the final expenditures are added, but depreciation and NIT यानी consumption of fixed capital और NIT को अगर हम deduct कर देते हैं then we get national income. NFIA is added to it. So some important formula in this regard are, स्टार्ट करते हैं हम एक्सपेंडिचर मेथड में हमेशा जीडीपी एट एमपी से, देन फाइनली वी कैन गो टू द जीएनपी एंड एमपी, एंड देन द नेशनल इनकम और द नेट नेशनल प्रोडक्ट एट फैक्टर कॉस्ट. सो लेट मी एक्सप्लेन यू अगेन वंस अगेन. PFCE that is private final consumption expenditure, GFCE that is government final consumption expenditure, components already बता चुकी हूं मैं आपको. GDCF that is gross domestic capital formation, which was made up of GDFCF plus change in stock plus net acquisition of valuables, and net exports, that is the basic difference between the export and import. Now, from GDP at MP, we can reach to the GNP at MP. For that, the GDP at MP plus NFIE will be added and we will be getting gross national product at market price. Now, the final term which we are calculating is net national product at factor cost. For that, we can start it from this also and that also. That is GNP at MP minus debt minus NIT, and that will give us the national income given by or calculated by expenditure method.